You may not know Tim Clark, the mild-mannered accountant at DST, but you need to know his story. At his peak, Tim could bench press 150 pounds with one arm. He was only born with one. In college, Clark ran a 10K on his knees since he was born with no legs. He's competitive and inspiring, but considers blending in another success. We met at the Corporate Challenge banquet, and I was the MC and read the nomination letter when you won the Alex George Award for Excellence. And in that letter, it seemed pretty clear that you've always wanted people to see you as normal, not amazing. Why is normal the best word for you?
Well, you know, it's not often I've heard people say I'm amazing, but when they do say that, I feel very uncomfortable with it. You know, I think God's amazing. You know, God gives us all of our gifts and talents, and you know, I believe it's our job to glorify Him, you know, with those gifts.
God and family, your parents have been, by your admission, very unselfish from the beginning, and they were probably unprepared for a baby that had one arm and no legs. But one of the pieces of advice is, I guess, from the nurse at the hospital to your mom was, treat him like everybody else. If he needs to get a swat, then he gets a swat. Did you get a lot of swats?
I got my share. You know, probably deserved a few more. But you know, God gave me two great parents, and they made some great decisions early on in my life. They had me undergo a couple operations to prepare my legs so that I could wear prosthetic limbs. And today, people can live very normal lives with prosthetic limbs. I've had people who have known me literally for years who didn't even know I didn't have any legs. That's how awesome the technology is today. And you know, they treated me just like all my other brothers and sisters. Grew up, the bar wasn't lowered for Tim. They put me through the public school system. Went to Williams Southern Elementary School and Palmer, and then on to Truman. And the expectation from a very early age is that I would have to compete against able-bodied people, both academically as well as athletically, and it was critical to my development, I believe.
So 4 kids in your house, and at home you're treated like everybody else. There had to be a point where you realized that you were different physically. When did that hit you?
You know, it honestly didn't until I was wrestling in high school. I remember they taped all of our wrestling matches, and we had to watch our matches to find our mistakes and correct them. And I about freaked out when I saw myself for the first time. You know, I think we all tend to look in the mirror. We tend to see what we want to see. And when I saw myself on video, I saw myself the way everybody else did, and with missing 3 limbs, and it messed me up for about a week. You know,
kids can be cruel, and you know, socially, you always want to fit in, whether you're in grade school or junior high, and you know, Tim has freckles. Well, you know, everybody laughs about, you know, you have freckles. And you know, did you handle things socially okay, being different?
You know, I did, and the kids, you know, maybe it was the grace of God, but I didn't face a lot of that, and kids were good. You know, I remember once I had to go on leave to have a surgery done, and when I came back, I got almost a hero's welcome, you know, from the kids. So maybe it was, I think the kids I just grew up with were extra kind, because I didn't face a lot of that growing up. So.
You have a brother that was a pretty good athlete, Cam, and you know, there was going to be a lot of playing in the street, in the yard, and you could play as long as you played with everybody else. And you mentioned it before, they were never going to lower the bar for you. If you wanted to play with the big kids, then you got to be like one of the big kids. How important was that, do you think, for your future, your development, to realize, okay, it's their world, I got to come up and deal with that?
Yeah, it was significant. My brother Cam was good at soccer and baseball, and we played lots of football games and wiffle ball games with the neighborhood kids. And I was expected to be just one of the guys, you know. And I never remember, you know, whenever I dropped a touchdown pass, I never remember hearing, you know, it's okay, Tim's missing 3 limbs. It was more, you know, why'd you drop that pass? I threw it right to you, you know. So the expectation was always high, and I had in my mind that I had to, you know, was supposed to be normal and compete with normal people.
There obviously came a point for you where
that competitive fire started to boil, where you wanted to get into competitions and games and compete and win, because winning feels really good. What was it about, that inside of you where it really hit you that needed to come out? You needed to be able to express yourself in an athletic way.
Well, when I got to be about in junior high, everybody was playing a musical instrument, and I narrowed it down to the trumpet and the French horn that I felt like I could play decently with one hand, and I became very competitive about it. And I became first chair for a couple of years. I remember back in junior high, and then I made the varsity band as a freshman. But I remember playing on the Truman Band for the football team and seeing the quarterback out there and wanting to be him, throwing a fourth quarter touchdown pass. From a very early age, I always dreamed of being a great athlete, and I believe that was, I was destined to be an athlete. So after my sophomore year in high school, I stopped playing music and just focused completely on getting my body prepared for sports.
Tim Clark put all of his efforts into making the high school wrestling team at Truman against all odds with no experience or guarantees, but he was willing to take that chance.
Failure is part of life. I've failed many times in my life, and I don't believe you can be afraid to fail. I'd rather go 0-35 than go 0-0.
Tim Clark was one of the many college kids at KU motivated by Danny and the Miracles. 20 days after Manning's Jayhawks won a national title, Clark ran his 10K, reaching his goal of beating an hour and a half. He ran 1:28. His goal setting and dedication started way before that in high school, when the goal was making Truman's wrestling team.
What was it about sports in general where you were going to focus in on one that you thought you could compete in? Okay, what can I do? And then you're focused on that goal of going out and being able to do something.
Yeah, I didn't know exactly what sport I would be competing in, but I began working out on a very fanatic workout program. I worked out like 3 hours a day. I was eating nothing but chicken and protein shakes and eggs, trying to get my body in shape for sports. When I was a freshman, I could only bench about 40 pounds with my left arm. By the time I was a senior, I could bench 110 pounds with my left arm. So I didn't know what sport I would compete in, but I knew there was something out there for me.
So you decided wrestling was going to be the one you went after. And the tricky thing there is, as a senior, you've got to make the varsity, because that's the way it is. You can't compete in JV, so you've got to be able to make the varsity your senior year after really not being a wrestler. What was that whole process like for you to try to get yourself ready? And, Hal McRae had one of the great quotes of all time. He always said his biggest motivator was the fear of failure. He was so afraid that he would fail that it really drove him. I mean, you put yourself in a position to fail. Mm-hmm. And the easy thing would have been just, I'm going to work out, I'm going to be in good shape and do all this, but you wanted to compete and make a team.
Yeah, the failure is part of life. I've failed many times in my life, and I don't believe you can be afraid to fail. I'd rather go 0-35 than go 0-0, so to speak. And so I knew the risks, and I had the confidence that I could succeed at wrestling if I put my mind to it.
So what was the process? Who were the guys you had to beat to make the varsity at your class?
Well, I had two guys in my 105-pound class, and I had to beat both of them. I pinned both of them in the first period. My biggest competition was at 98 pounds. The guy right below me was almost a two-time state champion, Jimmy Brewer, and he helped improve my skills rapidly, because you wrestle at two-time state champion, you either get better or you get killed. So I chose to get better, and he really improved my skills in a hurry.
So you go off of wrestling, you make the team, you're a 500 wrestler. You're thinking, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. Where were you confidence-wise in terms of being able to set a goal and to reach it?
Well, my confidence got a lot better. Early in the season, going into the first tournament, we had my partner had a hard time getting his weight down to the 98-pound class. So we were in the same weight class, and we had to wrestle off. And so here I was, a first-year wrestler, going up against a guy who was nearly a two-time state champion. And for half the match, I was winning. I was ahead 4-2, and I got a little tired. My left arm wore down. He got me on my back twice in the second and third period and ended up beating me. But that gave me a lot of confidence. I'm thinking, if I can go toe-to-toe with a guy who, is one of the best in the state, then I'm thinking I'm in the right heading in the right direction.
Well, that was really kind of the launching pad for you. You go to KU, there's a wrestling club, you're involved with that. You're swimming a mile a day, running a couple of miles a day. In fact, when you're in college, you run a 10K on your knees. You're doing all this stuff, to really be in shape. And, the technology is so amazing with some of the flex feet out there where, did you ever think, what? If I get a couple of titanium legs, I'm going to be running marathons and Ironman triathlons. Did you think that big picture, you were going to go after some really crazy goals?
At that time, I had run around on my knees my whole life, but never for any real distance. And so I was on the wrestling club, and I started running in the streets on my knees. And it quickly developed into a goal to run a 10K on my knees in under an hour and a half. I averaged about 14 minutes a mile on my knees. But I knew my knees couldn't take the punishment that it, obviously dealt out on the streets. So I cross-trained. I used swimming and I used the wrestling, and then I ran in the streets, and eventually was able to run a 10K on my knees in under an hour and a half.
What was the reaction of people that ran with you and against you? Sometimes it's a competition, but there's also kind of a bonding. There's a lot of support as you're running a race like that. Hey, come on, let's go faster. What was the reaction of people around you?
I had a lot of people cheering for me, and it was an experience I'll never forget. The police that day, they gave me a motorcade in front of me. They had 8 police motorcycles for the last quarter of a mile, and so that gave me, the incentive to drive to the finish line. But it was a day I'll never forget.
That was also kind of a period where it seemed like it was the Tim Clark look at me era. Me. A little bit of a selfish time for you, in that you felt like the focus was on you when it should have been on something much bigger. What brought you to the realization that maybe that the focus, while doing things for me is good, maybe I need to be looking at a higher power?
Yeah. Well, the biggest event in my life is when I became a born-again Christian through a campus ministry at KU. And it changed my perspective on everything, on life, on my view of the world, and it definitely changed my perspective on my disability. I believe before I was a Christian, I was more self-centered, and I believe when you're self-centered, being disabled can seem incredibly unfair, and why me type thinking, why me, God? And after I became a Christian, the question was more not why me, God, but what would you have me to do to use my disability, maybe to help other people, to become a ministry, to speak to other people, and so forth. It radically changed my whole view of life and my whole view of everything.
You have kind of a problem with separation of church and state, don't you? That if maybe there wasn't that division, some of the problems we have in the country today might not be as big.
Yeah, I believe, I speak briefly in the book about some of the problems that we face as a nation, like a national debt approaching $15 trillion. And I honestly believe that, over the last several decades, we've drifted away from faith in God. And, I believe a lot of our problems would begin to dissipate and go away if we would drift back towards faith in God. And I in chapter 6, wake up, America, with God all things are possible. And I firmly believe that.
That's the name of the book. And writing a book is, if I write a short story, I might slave for a couple of days, and 1,500 words. And even people who write for a living, doing a book is tough. And somebody that's not a writer, that had to be really hard. But, I'm thinking because you had that fire in your belly to write it, and there was a story that you felt like had to get out, is that what kept you going those days where you thought, I got nothing to say today?
Yeah, I believe God helped me write the book, to be honest. And you know, it was an experience I'll never forget. And I wanted to write a book. I believe God's got a mission and a destiny for all of us. And I wanted to write a book in such a way as to help people find their destiny and hopefully to inspire them to fulfill it. And you know, I included my own story, some of the challenges I had growing up, missing 3 limbs, accomplishments in 4 sports. But I also brought in some historical, cultural figures that have inspired me, as well as some sports stories that have inspired me. And then I bring in some life principles that I believe will help people, you know, find their destiny.
Who inspired you?
One of the people in the book is Martin Luther King Jr. Because, well, his fearlessness in the face of great opposition. He was brilliant, too. Brilliant man. I mean, by the time he was 15, he graduated from high school. Maybe, I think it was high school. And by the time he was 26, he had a PhD. I mean, he was brilliant. Yeah.
So you get this book knocked out, it's printed, you look at it, you think, oh, God, I hope people like it. And so you've been able to get some feedback. What was the first thing or one of the more memorable things that you heard at the beginning?
An elderly lady came up to me crying, and it just floored me, you know. And she said she couldn't put it down. She read it all in one day, and you know, I thought if I don't sell another book, you know, that was worth it all, you know. And you know, I just hope to inspire some people with the book.
Chapter 7 of Tim's book is called Do You Believe in Miracles? Part of it's a tribute to the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team and the lasting mark underdogs like Mike Eruzione made on all of us. Clark doesn't see their story as all that unique.
I think all of our lives are a miracle in progress. You know, this whole experience, you know, with the book and the swim, it's just made me reflect on my whole life, and I just see God, you know, intricately involved with every detail of our lives.
Tim Clark's gone through life with lots of smiles and very few excuses. He can't change the fact he was born without 3 limbs. So he copes, aims high, and tries to make a difference.
Part of who you are, really the definition of you is this fierce competitor, and you know, the wrestling and the running, and it sounds like the table tennis for you is kind of legendary. Corporate Challenge, I remember reading that you were 56-7 against all comers, you know, whatever the case might be. And the swimming to me was remarkable. There's a video on YouTube where you can see it, and to swim 50 meters down and back in 45 seconds is pretty quick, without benefit of being able to jump off the board at the beginning, no flip turn, and that's 2-3 seconds right there. I mean, that puts you at about 42 seconds, probably, maybe even a little bit faster if you trained harder. Out of all the athletic things that you've done, are there any that you can look at and say, you know what, I'm kind of proud of that?
The 56-7 against able-bodied competitors in the Corporate Challenge, I think that would be a challenge for anybody, able-bodied or to match, you know, and especially in Division A. You know, I was competing against Sprint and Cerner and some of the big, you know, Garmin, some of the big companies. So
are you a finesse? Are you a power? What do you do when you play?
Spin, finesse, defense. You know, I get a lot of balls back. You know, I'm not an offensive player.
Now, you've always competed with Corporate Challenge activities, right, where it's all comers. You know, whatever they might be able to bring physically. I mean, you're the same with them. The Paralympics seems like that might be something that would be a good avenue for you in terms of competition, if there's a way to level the playing field, and yet you've really never done that much with it. What's wrong with the system?
Well, I competed in '95 in the tryouts for the Paralympics, and also in '99, and the disability categories are pretty broad. The guys I ended up losing to, you know, not to complain, you know, I don't believe in complaining too much in life, but had harder to see disabilities. I'm obviously, you know, my disability is pretty obvious. I'm missing 3 limbs. Some of the guys I lost to, one of them had benign tumors. He ended up winning the U.S. 2008 National Collegiate Championship among able-bodied players. And you couldn't tell there was a lot wrong with him, you know. And yet he was. And another guy I lost to was Norman Bass. He was actually a two-sport professional athlete. He played defensive. He was defensive back for the Denver Broncos and also pitched for the Kansas City Athletics. And his disability was arthritis. And you know, just comparing arthritis to somebody missing 3 limbs is a little difficult in my view.
Well, you're kind of a policy changer. Did you ever think, you know what, I'm going to help them get this right and have the categories where they make more sense?
Well, I voiced a complaint, and that's all I believe in doing. You know, you make your voice be heard and move on. You know, I played, I gave it my best, and you know, that's all I can do.
But the beauty of that is, too, when you went to the competition in '95 was you saw the outlet, the opportunity for folks that normally wouldn't have the chance necessarily to compete, and yet they express themselves that way. So I think that part of it was good. That experience made it a positive deal.
Yeah, it was a positive experience. You know, I learned a lot from it. You know, I've learned more in life from failure than my successes. You know, and I made it to the final. You know, for the standing disabled. But we had like in the third game we had an 18-11 lead, and we ended up blowing the game and losing like 22-20 in the final game. But it was a good experience though.
Now, since you've written a book, one of the things that normally goes with that is a book tour where, you know, the authors get out and, you know, they're signing books, they're doing stuff. Are you comfortable in that role? Like, okay, now I got to find some churches to go to and to be able to get out in front of a group and, you know, whether it's 50 people, 100 people, 500 people, to tell your story. Has that been one thing where it's been a little bit out of a character for you, where you really had to just, okay, get me through this. I've got to be able to talk to these folks and tell them my story?
Yeah, I've definitely entered areas out of my comfort zone. I'm more of an athlete and I think a writer than I am a public, you know, persona and speaking out. But it's been good too. I'm all for new adventures and new experiences, and it's going to be an exciting journey.
It seems like your life has been kind of a series of checklists, and you get one thing done, you check it off, and you go to the next thing. What's the next mountain to climb for you? What else is out there?
Well, I'm competing in the corporate challenge this year. I swim in the 50. We're being aggressive with our training. My coach is Doug Hayden. He got me into the swim last year. He's a former diver at the University of Nebraska, and I'm coming in about 10 pounds lighter and going with the jammers instead of the trunks. The trunks slowed me down quite a bit last year, so we're shooting for 40 seconds. So that's the big mountain ahead of me right now.
Realistic? Can you reach that?
I'm going to hit the first wall in under 20 seconds, and then I'm hoping the crowd and adrenaline will bring it home. So,
you're a young guy, really, 40-ish, 43. What's the big picture for you? I mean, there's so much life ahead of you. Have you mapped it all out, what you want to be able to do 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
You know, I normally don't look that far ahead, but I see myself, you know, competing. Always. I love sports, always have, and I definitely compete. I'd like to try to win the national title in table tennis for the standing disabled. I came up a little short a few years back. Maybe another book, but I see myself in the ministry, hopefully helping other people find their destiny. And
is your life a miracle in progress?
You know, I think all of our lives are a miracle in progress. You know, this whole experience, you know, with the book and the swim, it's just made me reflect on my whole life, and I just see God, you know, intricately involved with every detail of our lives, and you know, I'm just more and more in awe of God, and I think all of our lives are a miracle in progress.
Well, for your courage and your determination and your ability for people to see your ability as opposed to your disability, you're certainly a hometown hero.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks.
Appreciate the time.
All right, thank you.